So welcome to the final session of GameRT's March mini conference on TTRPGs and libraries. I'm Rebecca Strang and my pronouns are she, they. I'm a children's librarian at Naperville Public Library and the president of GameRT. I also serve on GameRT's grant committee and program committee. This session will run now until 6:30. It is being recorded and live streamed to Twitch. All recordings of the sessions will be available on our Twitch channel after the event. Copies of the slides for presentations are linked in the conference group resource document, which will also be linked in chat for you. And for this session, we'll have two 30-minute presentations followed by a Q&A. If you have questions for presenters, please let us know who the question is directed to. And if you're watching on Zoom, please use the Zoom Q&A feature. If you've never used that feature before, there will be a link about it in the chat. And if you've joined us on Twitch, our tech team will snag your questions and add them to our Q&A queue. And with that, we'll get into our last session of the day. Our first presenter is DiNardo, and he is presenting The Rules Are Not the Experience, Break the Rules Barrier for New TTRPG Players. Go ahead, Carl.
Thank you so much. Let me get my screen shared here. All right, excellent. Hopefully everyone can see that. We're jumping right in, I guess. Yes, so my name is DiNardo. I am a research and instruction librarian at the University of South Florida. But more appropriate for today, I love games and gaming, and tabletop role-playing games being one of the things I have been most into recently, though this also dates back pretty far for me, back to 2nd edition AD&D, Vampire the Masquerade, other games that are escaping my brain right now. But what I have noticed and others have noticed as a problem, I'll call it, is that a lot of the games that come to mind, and especially if you haven't engaged with role-playing, is an idea, and I don't know where it comes from other than this huge shelf of books that are the rules for Dungeons and Dragons, being that there's a lot of rules to get your head around, and that kind of stops players immediately. So just some questions to think about as we go through the session. What are some things that you've heard or maybe experienced yourself that are reasons that someone might shy away from trying to learn how to play one of these games? And maybe they were otherwise would have been interested, or if somebody you know has had a bad experience, what was it that caused that? So I'm kind of focused on getting yourself and others past the rules barrier, but there's other barriers or things that can cause bad experiences as well. And I think in service to this, we want to be considering all of those things. Right. So let's kind of look at this idea of negative TTRPG experiences, and I'm going to talk a little bit about a friend of mine that I think popped into the session today. Her name is Bree. And the mini there is one that she selected for what I'm going to call her first character, even though she tried to play Dungeons and Dragons a while back and had a bad experience. And part of that bad experience had to do with something that is kind of this white lie of telling people, oh, it's a great game, you have limitless possibilities, you can do anything. Well, that's not true. There's a lot of rules that kind of govern what can and can't happen. What she had told me in that experience was that she was very excited and then tried to do something and it wasn't in the rules, and so she couldn't do it, and she got turned off. to it. She obviously got interested at a certain point again because she's playing a game currently at my table, and I'm very excited about that. And there were some interesting things that, or there were things that she found interesting in talking to me and my wife about what we liked about it. So we'll get into some of that a little later. So let's try to improve some of those things. And I do want to kind of like frame this in a way that I think is lost a lot of times when there's a YouTube video that talks about like how to be a good DM and things like that. But you always want to consider that your situation is unique, your players are going to be unique, your game is going to be unique, and your own style is going to be unique if you're running the game, because ultimately, a lot of what I'm talking about today are like DM tips and tricks. And what I'd like to do at the end of this is have a toolkit that you can draw from that takes those unique situations, games, players, and yourself, and pick and choose what might work for you. But one thing that helps is that there's some common sticking points. So we can kind of try to address those. Also, these these videos a lot of times will have clickbaity titles. The one I have here about 7 tricks to make your players love you, I don't think is a real title, and please don't make that. And there's great stuff to find there, but a lot of times they present like, if you just do this, it's going to be great. And that's not the case always. Think of those as toolkits to draw from as well.
Carl, I hate to interrupt you. Your
Oh, no,
slides
please.
aren't progressing. It still shows on the very first
Oh,
slide
no.
for us.
Okay. I deeply apologize for that. How is that looking?
Yeah, I see it on no single answer now.
Okay. Well, my apologies there.
No worries.
Let me back up one slide because I do want you to see Breeze Mini. I love it. But I thank you for pointing that out. So yeah, we're trying to build a toolkit here, and think of that as you look at other things as well. Okay, so the caveat: these ideas won't work or apply for everyone, and part of that is that we need this structure and guidance, and some people need it more than others, so they hang on to rules, and taking that away from players can be problematic. I think of it a lot if you've ever been given an assignment, or if you teach and have given an assignment and don't have great parameters, the students don't like that. They want some structure. So that's something to consider as well. Like tossing out rules and breaking rules can have consequences you don't necessarily intend. That being said, really, if you're somebody that's a rule follower, you have permission to break the rules. Almost every game that I can think of, role-playing game, has some type of thing in there that says, as the GM, you have free reign to kind of break the rules and do what you need to for your game. So you don't need my permission. You have the game's permission. It's in the rules to break the rules, is all I'm saying. So as we move through this, I'm going to break this just into 4 sections, right? The things you want to think about for your program. These are things you're already doing. We're not going to spend a whole lot of time on that. Things before the game, as you're in the planning stages, things to do in game, and then just a couple of other things that you might want to consider. And so these are all going to be things that help you yourself get past difficult rules and help your players get past difficult rules. Okay. So what are some program things? These are things that you're thinking about already. So this is going to be easy if you're trying to set up a library program. What is your community interest? Are they interested in specific games? Are you interested in specific games? And if those things don't align, are you able to adapt? and who are you as if you're the one running the game, and what is your voice and style. The biggest jump and progress I made as a teacher was when I learned that I didn't have to mimic what I thought I was supposed to do as a teacher, and I found my own voice and style and was able to kind of chase that. Are you working in person? Are you working virtually? Some of these things could affect how you approach the game. And then as a program, consider maybe having, and I heard this as advice or something happening in one of the earlier sessions, consider beginner only games and beginner friendly games. And that can help if you're breaking rules. Again, some people don't like that. So if they're hyper aware of the rules, that can kind of disrupt the game as well. Moving into the game itself. I'm sorry, moving to the before game things. So outside of the big program considerations. You can ask, if you have signups, you can ask players to maybe self-report their experience with the game that you're going to run. You can, this is a little bit of work, but I have done this for different things. You can kind of streamline or maybe find a streamlined version of a character sheet. So I definitely find that for beginning characters, the D&D character sheet, for example, is fairly complex. And there's ways around that, D&D Beyond being a good one that's been mentioned many times today. But really, there's a lot of stuff on there that a beginning character doesn't need to know, use, or certainly have in front of them to confuse them, to just get started. Really, if you really want to break some rules, just have the 6 stats and how they play out, and you can kind of just have characters roll or players roll on those 6 stats. Again, I keep using D&D as a touch point. This applies to many games. You can certainly have pre-generated character sheets ready to go. The starter kits for many games have pre-generated characters. There's many more you can find online, and you can have just a variety of go-to characters that players can kind of customize and make their own, but the stats are already there. And then action cheat sheets can be great. There can be a lot of things that even experienced players forget they can do, say in combat, because you tend to just hit things, cast a spell, or run away. And people forget that there's other things they can do. Finally, you can ask players to watch short preparatory videos. There's many things in the document that was just shared that might be of value. You can certainly find many more on YouTube, or you can, if you want it to be something that you create for your own library, you can create these on your own. What do your players need to know for the game that you're going to run? Okay, so during the game, you should definitely keep in mind that players can learn this as they go. There's certain things that might be helpful to know in advance, for sure. But this is a game where everybody can help each other a little bit, and you're kind of teaching players anyway, even experienced players. You're going to tell them what they need to roll, and it's not that much more of a leap to then teach a new player why they're rolling it. So that's not too hard if you yourself are already pretty experienced with the game. This is also something that's true if you make it true, right? You can write a game that is designed, say a one-shot, is designed to be a learning experience. Color-coded dice can be very helpful, because if I say roll a blue die, many people will find that much easier to pick up and roll than it would to say the D8 or the 8-sided die. And then you have to describe, yeah, that's the one that looks like a diamond, and you know, that kind of thing. But be aware that color blindness can interfere with this. And so the set that I have pictured here, there is a green D4 and a red D6, and somebody who is red-green colorblind might have difficulty with that. The low stakes roll, I'm a big fan of this. So if you're jumping right into combat, that's fun, but it's stressful. And it kind of is high stakes. So having rolls that teach that same mechanism, but do not necessarily come with big consequence can be a really good thing. So a friend of mine who is a player at one of my games, but also runs his own game, did a one-shot to teach his sister how to play, and we were at the Grand Harvest Festival, and there were all kinds of just festival games and archery contests and things like that. And so she was learning to do skill checks and how to do attack rolls, but nothing was attacking her character. So they were very low stakes, and that's a great way to start someone. I'm also a big fan of starting at low level. I'm a big fan of low level play. I'm a little weird. I do like failure. And I do like high stress. So I do like low level play, but in terms of teaching somebody, it's a lot more manageable to start at level 1 than it is even level 3, which I know is a common place to start for D&D. Level 1 characters just have less to worry about. There's only so many things they can do. And that's just, there's already a lot to try to manage. So that's something that I think is a useful place to start. And then again, I'm a fan of failure, but a lot of people are not a fan of failure. And I do like games that incorporate a fail forward mechanism. And if there's not one already there, it's not too hard to add one. So if you're playing D&D, and I do believe that they are considering adding this in the next iteration. A fail forward mechanism you might use is if you critically fail on a D20 roll, you as the GM can give the player inspiration, right? So they have a D20 to use for advantage later in the game. So that's just something you can try. All right. So this is more during the game things. Be a big fan of your PCs. Feel their failures, celebrate their successes. I think this is more common than it used to be, but and I don't see a lot of tables where there's a real combative PCs versus the DM. But it can be a thing. If you're the GM, be a fan of your PCs. And really, especially for new players, you're trying to get them hooked so that they will then want to learn more of the rules and will want to come back. If you figure out what is the one thing that they like most about their character, and then have something in the game that connects to that, that's really going to that's going to grab them. Ask them, engage them. What does that look like, right? So if they cast a spell, what does their personal fireball look like, or their fairy fire, or whatever it is? Have them describe it. It's their character. This doesn't do anything this doesn't even have to do with the rules. You're just getting them invested. And then this is a big one for me. Do fewer rolls. If they wrote a backstory, if they're really excited about something with their character, and it makes sense, yeah, you know what, your experience in whatever that is, it just you know that, or you're just able to do that. You don't need to roll. You got it. Great. Move on. They're going to love that. I kind of was dismissive about it there, but you can really capture them with how you don't make them do something. There's no rules applied. Their character just knows how to do it. Brennan Lee Mulligan from Dimension 20 is fantastic at doing this, and really has shaped my game running quite a bit. Remember, you can break any rule you like, but just know that it helps to know why you're breaking it sometimes. That's not totally important, but if you have an ongoing game and you've broken a rule, that can have downstream consequences. So keep that in mind. But ask yourself, is it really important that I follow this rule for the experience that we want? Or is it just, it's talked about the rule of cool a lot of times. Sometimes this is just too cool. We're not going to let the rules get in the way. If you don't know a rule, don't stop the game to look it up. It's probably not that important. And if it is that important, just be upfront. Hey, I don't really know what's supposed to happen there. Here's what's going to happen here. If we're playing again, I'll figure it out before next time. And also, players don't know what you don't know, especially new players who haven't played with you before. They don't know what you don't know. They don't know what's going on back behind a screen. If you're somebody that uses a screen, if you say it, that's what it is. And if you don't know, I can't remember the podcast I heard this on, but it was great. It was a great podcast. I think it was targeting new DMs. If you don't know what to do, just have somebody roll a d20. You can either make a decision or have somebody roll a d20. And if you don't want to do that, fall back on your character's good at that. You got that. No roll needed. Again, this is not a rule thing so much as you want your characters to be hooked, or your players to be hooked and invested and not fall away if you're building a program, right? You definitely want to, this is more, it's established pre-game, but I have this during game things. Is PC death an option? I have it in game because if it is on the table, your players need to be aware of it, and you want to make it meaningful if possible. We all know sometimes PCs do ridiculously dumb things, and that might be a tough one to make meaningful. But be considering how that may or may not play out, and how that will affect your players. And finally, we'll get to some other things here. As you build a player base, you might find that players want to run games. That's awesome. Teach them your ways. Teach them about how you're operating the games, and not to be too bogged down in rules. I think that's a very easy trap to have happen. If you are interested in this but don't have anyone that has experience, I don't necessarily think that's the case in this crowd, but it's something that I've considered. You might reach out to pro GMs. Maybe they'd be willing to donate some time to help somebody learn how to run a game. They certainly have to teach new players how to play all the time. It might be worth budgeting to audition a GM, or maybe even consult. I don't know. I haven't tried this. This was just something that I was thinking about. Or throw all that out and pick a game with fewer rules. We've heard a lot of these games today. Powered by the Apocalypse is an open rule set. You only need to roll d6s. It's fantastic. There's so many variants that have come out of that. Kids on Bikes, we just heard that. Or so Bikes is the 80s themed game. They've adapted Kids on Brooms if you're feeling more magic-y. And those dice explode. And the first time a player rolls a die and has it explode for them, they are going to freak out. That's an awesome experience. Fate Core system, you're rolling fewer dice overall just because it is a little more narrative. And again, it leans into that your PC just does that type of thing. Games that Fiasco is a very narrative improv game, and really I think the newest version there was no dice rolling to decide anything anyway, but the newest version has cards and no dice at all. And if you want even fewer rules, pick a game that's a one-page RPG. We've heard several of these. One I've heard several times on here, and the GameRT ran one of their low stress, high mayhem honey heists last week, and that was hilarious. That's a great game. It's getting a lot of attention, and it should. But here's some others that might appeal to you. Cats in High Places. You're a cat. You're doing cat things. Your owner is probably not happy with that, but they love you anyway. Adventure Skeletons. This time you're a skeleton. And you're bored with guard duty back down in the dungeon, so you get out of the dungeon, and you're looking for adventure out in the open world. This one is so good. Last Tea Shop is a solo or two-person role-playing game where you run a tea shop that exists between the world of the living and the world of the dead, and you are open serving people their last tea before they pass to the great beyond. Amazing game, perfect for libraries that maybe don't have great gaming space, because it has a lot of just quiet, contemplative journaling time associated with it. I love Last Tea Shop. And a couple final thoughts. I think I'm close on time here. You likely can't and shouldn't do all of these things. Take what you need, try it. If it doesn't work, try something else. Get feedback from your players about what you've tried, get their perspective, and find your voice and your own style. So with that, go be awesome. You got this. No role needed.
That was fantastic, Carl. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Next up, we have our final presentation of the conference. Beatrix Livesey-Stephens will be presenting Collaborative World Building Makes Everything Better, and Here's Why. And then we'll have Q&A after her presentation.
Hello, everyone. Just give me a second. Okay. That is the wrong slide. That's my favorite slide, but the wrong slide. One sec. I'm just gonna share. It is it's 11:30 p.m. in the UK at the moment, but I hope everything works. Okay. Ooh. Oh no. Oh, my notes are on the wrong. Oh dear. Sorry, 1 second.
You're okay, no worries.
Okay, let me not. Okay. I'll put this on my laptop so I can do things. Oh, okay. Oh, this always happens when I do presentations. It says the screen sharing is paused. Is someone able to share my slides for me?
I can share them for you. Right now it says you're sharing a screen, but I can let me pull up your slides and
Awesome,
I
thank
will
you.
do it for you. No
Great,
problem.
thank you so much.
Just let me know when to move forward.
Great, okay. Thank you so much. I'm just gonna start my 30-minute timer. Great, cool. So hi everyone. My name's Bea and I am a game studies student studying in Scotland. My research focuses on tabletop role-playing games and safety tools, but today I'm going to focus on collaborative world building. Right, so ever since I played a game called I'm Sorry, Did You Say Street Magic online at the Glasgow Zine Festival, I've been a really firm believer that collaborative world building has huge potential to build communities, especially for libraries, and that it makes everything better. Can we go to the next slide, please? Before I continue, I'd like to issue some disclaimers. Firstly, like many things, collaborative world building is a spectrum. And yesterday in the middle of the night, I realized that it's more than one spectrum. I'll pick that up a little bit later, but I encourage keeping that in mind during the presentation because that will get revealed later. Can we go to the next slide, please? Secondly, since I submitted my proposal for this conference, I GM'd for the second time ever in my entire life. This was specifically for a flashback in time during a session of a Thirsty Sword Lesbians campaign that I'm in, where our regular GM played a character in that flashback, who they'd later go on to reprise and continue playing while still being the GM. But GMing that flashback and describing that environment and doing the world building was amazing. And I would go as far as to say that I loved being the master of that world for the hour during the session that I GM'd the flashback. However, aside from that game-changing, pun intended, experience, I believe that collaborative world building makes everything better in two senses of the phrase. Can we go to the next slide, please? Number one, it makes things more good. And number two, it makes things all better. So, which is to mean it is healing. Can we go to the next slide, please? All right, so I'm going to tackle point one first. So when a game master sets like a campaign in any game world, be that fictional or otherwise, the units of interactivity in that world might be gone undiscussed apart from specific landmarks, characters, and objects that are pointed out and that are integral to the narrative that the GM might have in mind if you're playing a game with a GM. And obviously, the GM can't point out every tree on the street, every boulder, every NPC, every nook and cranny, everything you would actually see if you were looking through the character's eyes, and everything your character knows about themselves and their community. Which is to say that in non-collaborative world building, only the GM knows the world the best. And I consider this to become a big problem when the lines are blurred between what characters should know what things, and that the GM has knowledge that the players don't have, but as players, they should have that knowledge. Like the GM thinks the players know things that they actually don't. And it's really hard to remember what players don't know when you, as the GM, for example, know all of the things. And if players are given a set amount of information about the world, which they definitely will be, it can be super hard to fill in gaps. So, for example, if a GM tells their players that the world they're operating in is a fantasy world, what can the players actually infer from that? And what might they infer either correctly or incorrectly? So when creating their character's backstory, for example, how can players understand the hard and soft constraints of the world? So the things that definitely will change, the things that could change with a bit of a push, and stuff that absolutely can't and absolutely won't change, like elephants definitely won't start falling from the sky at all. Like that's never ever going to happen. But like, maybe lions exist. We don't know about that. So how can we make it so that players can interact with the world with the same knowledge as their characters would have about what is out there, and with the meta knowledge that players have? When knowledge about a world is unclear, or shared knowledge about a world is unclear, players don't know the true extent of their agency or their character's agency. And of course, Different players and characters can know different things about the world at different times, but players can easily lose track of if there's something they should know that they actually don't, or a gap that they can't quite map onto their character and the narrative, which could leave players feeling a bit stuck as to the world that they're operating in and how their character is, quote unquote, allowed to interact with it, which I have definitely come up with a lot of times, and I'm sure a lot of people who are playing for the first time, especially if they're young people, for example, will come up against a lot. I am really excited to be giving this presentation to a bunch of librarians because I don't know how correct I am in saying what I'm about to say, but as a lover and user of libraries, I believe that what libraries are about is access to knowledge, access to freedom of information, access to thought, access to thinking about possible and impossible histories and futures, access to a place where you can learn and have fun and connect with people without being expected to spend money. And in some ways, maybe in many ways, they are a form of escape, but also about shared futures and shared reality. So most often and historically, this form of escapism in libraries is conceptualized as like, you're reading a book alone, for example, but the expansion to libraries being TTRPG havens really warms my heart and is really indicative of different types of community building and connection through a shared fiction within reality. And it is that shared fiction and shared knowledge that's really important to me. So it's very different to be playing as a character in a world that quote unquote like belongs to someone else, or like specifically does not belong to you. Like it's not your world, it's the GM's world who made the whole thing or something. That's very different to be playing as a character in a world that already has parts of you weaved into it and has the community of the table weaved into it, which belongs to you and belongs to everyone else at the same time. And that's what I think this is all about. Because there's a difference between, for example, players uncovering parts of a map or parts of a world that the GM has made. And that's super cool. I'm not trying to knock that. But there's a difference between that and players having an unclear picture of what exactly their level of agency is and the level of interactivity with what's around them because they're not sure what is around them. And now I'm gonna get into talking about street magic, and I'm just gonna clarify, yes, you are only meant to be seeing this one slide. I don't have many slides, but we're all good. So to me, the tabletop role-playing game, I'm sorry, did you say street magic is essential to have in a library because it makes collaborative world building the main activity, and it seamlessly weaves it into role play and vignettes, which creates more world building, more connection, and more shared knowledge that can be used much more effectively. And when I say like is used more effectively, what I mean is people can have more fun because their level of agency is clearer, which I would argue makes the play more meaningful. So if you haven't heard of street magic, it is a GM-less city building story game for 2 to 6 players, and it runs for 3 or more hours, but you can run it for shorter if you want, or do multiple sessions working on the same city. You discover and imagine a city filled with life and vivid detail, packed with a myriad of neighborhoods, landmarks, and residents. You discover their true names and the ways they intersect, then set events in motion that will change or alter their relationships. And street magic was originally conceived as a hack of Microscope by Ben Robbins, which I thoroughly recommend. And I recently was reminded that there's a sister game to street magic that's called There Are Names Here More Powerful Than Our Own. And it's about how you come up with true names for your landmarks and characters and everything in the game, which is super great. And I love it so much. So the vivid detail of street magic is something that I feel is missing from a lot of tabletop role-playing games and a lot of the campaigns. And that's not for lack of wanting that detail. That's not for the players not wanting that sort of detail, but I think it's because keeping up to date with that sort of shared knowledge is really, really, really hard when the world building is like specifically not collaborative, and the one person doing all the world building is the GM. And like I said before, uncovering a place to like in a similar way to in a video game where a map gets filled out as a character is super cool, but that's only if the characters and players are on the same wavelength in regards to that. If a character doesn't know a place exists and then they stumble on it and the player has that same experience and they're like, whoa, an enchanted forest, that's so cool, that's great. But if the character knew about the enchanted forest all along and the players didn't, there's a bit of a disconnect there, and that makes play less fun. So if players have uncertainty about the world and the narrative that restricts their agency in ways they don't want, that makes the game less fun and more difficult to navigate. And as I've mentioned, there can be a lot of relying on implied, inferred, implicit or unspoken knowledge about how things work in certain worlds, because a person or a GM can say, this is a medieval fantasy, make of that what you will, or something like, it's a sci-fi world, or it's cyberpunk, without actually codifying the elements as part of the world with other players in order to have players knowingly bounce off of that. So someone who's working within the framework of medieval fantasy might be thinking, it's medieval fantasy, therefore dragons totally exist and everyone knows that. But their players might be thinking, do dragons exist? Are they just myths? Do people tell stories about them? Have people said that they've seen them but like are lying? Are they trying to like make money off of seeing dragons or like pretending to see dragons? Something like that. So there's a difference between a group knowing there are dragons and a group knowing there are myths about dragons but no dragons, or there are myths about dragons and hey, maybe they exist, but if they do, your characters sure don't know that, eyes emoji. And another example might be the difference in a sci-fi setting where most people own lightsabers. Could be what a GM says to the group, but another GM in the same sort of setting might say only the very powerful get to own lightsabers, and that can change what's it called? That can change the way a group or a narrative works completely, just with that little little bit. And I feel like the crux of a lot of this is that in order for the characters to not know things, players most often have to know about the absence of that knowledge on their character's end. Can we go to the next slide, please? I'm seeing so much fun stuff in the chat. I absolutely love this. Thank you so much. Right, so this brings me to my second interpretation, which is when I when I say collaborative world building makes things better, I also mean to say it makes things all better. So collaborative world building is healing. And so when I first started role playing, I was very quiet and I didn't think I role played quote unquote well. And a lot of this was because I was really afraid of doing something wrong. And over 4 years later, I think I'm a better role player, as much as the idea of being a good role player can be a whole presentation in itself. The thing about collaborative world building is that even if you're a very shy and quiet player who might not want to speak much, an idea that you put forward in a game within a collaborative world building framework where people are going around and talking about what they want to add to the world, what happens there is an idea you put forward that the group codifies to exist in the world, like the haunted barn or the sparkling falls, that's going to get referenced again and again because that's a specific part of the world. And that reminds you that your voice is integral to the game, and it reminds you that you are listened to and that parts of you exist in the world, and that is engaged with, and that they and you matter. And I'm very biased, but in my opinion, all of the best tabletop role-playing games have a little sort of section that's in the rules that's like, help other people to shine, feel deeply, do good things, think very hard, love your friends. And that's so cute, and I love that so much. And this relates very much to what Evan was saying way earlier about tabletop role-playing games as a conversation. And as I believe, tabletop role-playing games as a conversational framework. And people engaging with stuff that you've thought up and stuff you've made is really healing, in the sense that shy and anxious players, or players who don't have many friends or feel quite lonely, especially kids and teens, will feel so much better when people engage with stuff that they helped to build, even if they don't yet feel confident speaking or role-playing much. And in fact, others engaging with stuff that they helped to build, and even the fact that they were given the chance to build, makes it so much more likely that these kids and teens will feel confident role-playing later. And I didn't really start playing D&D or any tabletop role-playing games until I was in university. And I cannot tell you how much a difference would have been made in my life if I had known I was like allowed to play D&D when I was 13. I used to really like model UN, and that made me think I loved politics, but I actually just loved LARP, and I can't believe 5 years of my life was stolen from me not knowing that LARP existed. But yeah, when I said that world building is multiple spectrums, one of the spectra that I wanted to talk about was that I'm a massive believer in the idea that world building isn't just about the geography or the demographics of a place, but it's also about character backstory and character relationships and all that jazz, and I love that so much. And when I talk about character relationships, I'm not necessarily trying to put something in place that's like, these two characters are best friends and they act like best friends all the time, and that's that. But I really love games that offer questions up, like Wonder Home, for example, because every presentation has mentioned Wonder Home, and I love that to pieces. And Thirsty Sword Lesbians and many other games. Instead of a bunch of dice rolls and lots of stats, I really like that we are given all these questions, all of these prompts, and we go and answer them. And there are so many ways to answer so many little beautiful, delicious nuggets of question prompts that make the world building so good. And what I mostly love about that, in the sense of like character world buildingness, is that these questions are very targeted and very specific, and also very broad, but in a way that that positions these relationships and this world building to evolve. Because who's ever played any kind of campaign where the world building has been static, in the sense that you've drawn a map and you've not crossed things out, or you've moved things around and been like, oh, we've introduced this new point, so this whole thing doesn't work, but this new thing we've introduced is so organic and beautiful and totally cool and great. And I just really love that when people do collaborative world building, there's some sort of co-production of a representation of your community. I don't necessarily mean that when you're sitting around a table, you map everyone onto a character and you map the library space into the game world, but everyone has a part of themselves in that world, and in that way you get to co-produce a representation of your community, and I just think that's absolutely beautiful. Can we go to the next slide, please? Oh yes, oh nice, oh one of my favorite slides. So I'm a massive proponent of using safety tool frameworks for world building in session 0 and beyond, and I can't wait to think about this. Where do I even start? So I was really happy to see so much safety tool stuff in the resource doc. I think that's absolutely amazing. But I wanted to talk to all of you about how you can use safety tool frameworks for creativity and safety. When I talk about defining the scope of your world building, I think that the X card has a lot of potential in helping to situate a frame of reference that's relative to the reality outside of the game, because all of us have our frame of reference, and that's planet Earth, that's wherever we've grown up. And I find that it's very cool to use the X card to veto elements of the game and use that within the world building. So, for example, let's take a common X carded thing. So spiders, for example, a lot of people really don't like spiders and would have a much better game experience if they weren't brought up in game. But you can use this for the world building to say, okay, there are no spiders in this game, but what does that do to the narrative? Are there loads of flies around? Do flies even exist at all? Are there is there another like resident scary thing that all the kids are really scared of, but it just isn't spiders because they don't exist in the world? So that can do really great things for the narrative and for the world building. But I also really like the idea of using the safety tool framework to veto things that people don't necessarily have a problem with. They're not something that people are uncomfortable with having in the game. Yes, exactly. Someone just said in chat that it's like no and. That's so good. I love that so much. Do you mind if I steal that when I talk about this again? It's like, yeah, so saying no and. So no windows. What does that mean? How does this affect the world? Was there a great window destruction day where people decided no more surveillance, we have no windows now, time for anarchy? So yeah, as I've said with some bullet points, this encourages a lot of thought about knock-on effects from the lack of an element, and a lot of bottom-up world building lends itself to more vivid detail. So if you have no windows, go ham on that. Like there's so many knock-on effects, lots of butterfly effects that come out of having no windows or no spiders or like no candy, no many things. I really encourage you to use X cards to veto things from your game that aren't necessarily about safety. And I absolutely believe that when you use safety tool frameworks to veto things that are not about safety specifically, it makes people use these tools for safety much more, because you're making the X card not taboo at all. Like people are tapping it left and right, saying let's not have this, let's also not have this, and people are sticking to those boundaries, sticking to those constraints, and I think that's totally great, and I very much encourage use of safety tools for world building and safety. Can we go to the next slide, please? This is a diagram which is definitely wrong, because Wander Home is much more world building than I thought it was. But when I say collaborative world building is a spectrum, one of the first things I conceptualized was there are some games that have a lot of collaborative world building built into them, and some games that have less of it. So I put D&D very far at the end of not much collaborative world building, because a lot of the time D&D is about the GM might have some sort of specific vision and wants to tell a story, wants to have a plot, wants to have a narrative, and And that's pretty cool. Like that's what D&D is about. And that's, I guess, why there are different types of railroading, for example. There are players who railroad, and that's not fun for, like, that there are players who railroad in a way that isn't fun for anyone. And then there are players that are like, we've come into this tavern and we see this brooding man, and he's definitely the quest giver, but there's also a goblin who's called Sam Snorkel, and we're gonna go talk to Sam Snorkel. And that makes things great because the GM is just like, okay, let's rock and roll with this thing. But I think it's quite interesting, and also a little, but also potentially doesn't solve anything, to look at tabletop role-playing games on a spectrum of very world-buildy to not world-buildy at all. Because as much as I do think collaborative world-building can make everything better, there is a time and a place for collaborative world-building. So in D&D, maybe not so much, but in Powered by the Apocalypse games, Monster Hearts, The Quiet Year, for example, where you build a community and you think about destruction, and Street Magic, where you also build a community and think about vignettes. I think that's amazing. I have no idea what belongs in the middle. If you do know, please let me know. And maybe the reason I don't know why something is in the middle is because nothing is attached to how world-buildy a game is, how collaborative world-buildy a game is. But if you do, let me know. I would love to know. I just really liked making this diagram. Can we go to the next slide, please? Oh, I thought I had one other slide that said collaborative world building is a spectrum. That was at the beginning, probably. I think we skipped that. But yes, anyway. Oh, thank you so much. I'm so sorry. Yeah, if you take anything away from this talk, I guess it is that collaborative world building is a spectrum. And one of those ways is some games have a lot of collaborative world building in them and some don't. But the other way is that collaborative world building isn't just about the demographics and the geography, but is about the relationships characters have together. And if you chuck a bunch of questions at people or a bunch of prompts and get them to connect to a lot of characters, you're going to get some great roleplay, you're going to get some great social cohesion and all that jazz. Also, use safety tools for safety and world building and creative and great creativity. Look at the consent in gaming PDF from Monty Cook. Thank you so much. I've totally loved this conference. Well done, everyone. That is the end of my talk. Thank you so much for sharing slides.
You're welcome, no problem at all. Thank you so much for your presentation. I think that was the perfect way to kind of cap this conference, because that's, you know, the main theme through all of this is that libraries are for communities and games can help build those communities, and tabletop role-playing games embody that perfectly. So we are ready for some Q&A. If you have questions for Carl or B, let us know. We do have our first question. This is for Carl. This is from Jared, and it says, "Hey Carl, great presentation. This is not specifically an RPG question, but your GameRT minicon bio says in part that you use tabletop games to help teach information literacy concepts. I want to do that with RPGs and board games. They've looked at your LibGuides and don't see links to activities. So they're asking if you have links to additional information about using tabletop games other than RPGs for teaching information literacy concepts."
Oh, wow, that's a great question. So part of what you don't see, this is where I'm at now is a relatively new position for me. And currently USF does not have a game collection. So this is something that I'm looking to maybe work towards. So I'm establishing myself where I am. I have written about this. Others have a little bit as far as using games to teach information literacy, and I'm pushing it's part of my current research, and I'm pushing into trying to develop tools to help people be able to identify games that might be good for that, and then and how to incorporate them. This has the potential to be way too long of an answer. But I'm happy to like talk to you maybe more one-on-one about it. The short answer is that most, I'm going to say most because I'm sure there's not all, but most games have some element of information that's associated with them. And from that standpoint, if a lot of games have information being at a deficit, so they're maybe not totally open. And at that point, like how we engage with that information, there's a potential to learn something about information searching behaviors and things like that. So working from that, I've used a lot of social deduction games. Students really like those to play a game, and then one of the prior sessions talked a lot about the importance, if you're teaching with games, on debriefing and really having conversations about what happened. And that's, to me, where the learning happens. What was interesting to me was that these are designed to be fun. They're not designed to like teach you something explicitly, but they can. And so if my students are playing something fun, they're engaged with it, and then we talk about it afterwards, and that's where the learning happens. So please send me an email. I'm really happy to like talk to you more about that.
Yeah, I think that debriefing part is super important. We do that with our kids' RPG program at the library, and it's the playing is fun, but the debrief session is amazing because you get to hear the connections that they made with the games, the connections that they made with each other, and like the skills they like to develop and all of that. It's a lot of fun having that debrief session. All right, we have another question for Carl. Do you try to determine rule heaviness when gathering players, or at session 0 when you've already gathered the players?
I think I'm gonna have to interpret that a little bit. Determine rule heaviness as far as how heavy a game I want to play is probably based on what the players want out of it. I think some people will come to D&D as an example, right? With certain expectations. And part of what I wanted to try, I think I probably glossed over this a little bit, but part of what I wanted to try to get across is that you can advertise and market your games as like rule friendly to people who are scared of rules, right? And so I hope I'm answering a question in that I think the players and what the players want out of a game will determine what I want to run, because I just kind of like doing it. So I'm pretty flexible. I just want to be around people that want to have a good time. There's definitely like stories I want to tell, but I have a long running game, and I can't leave anything alone. So like I probably have the longest Lost Mine of Phandelver running game in the history of the Lost Mine of Phandelver, and it looks nothing like Lost Mine of Phandelver at this point. And I think we're about to wrap that up next Saturday, actually, and that's probably going to be the first arc of a long game. That satisfies my need to like, as B was talking about, like tell a story, which I'm not even really doing. Like I have an idea for things, and my players just, their actions affect the world. So I'm totally cool with all my other games being, what do you all want? Which really my longstanding game is that anyway. We established that at the start.
And B, if you have any insight on that question, please feel free to jump in too.
Oh, insight about rule heaviness.
If you determine rule heaviness before you're gathering players or at session 0.
Yeah. Ooh. I mean, I have only ever GM'd twice in my entire life, but I mean, as a player, like, I mean, I'm sure a bunch of you have like probably heard like, if you know D&D, you can learn everything, because despite D&D being the thing everyone knows how to play, it's got so much more rules than a bunch of other tabletop role-playing games. So even though that's seen as like the standard, it's actually really easy to play a game that doesn't have many rules. But as a player, I think I'd probably want to know the complexity of the rules I'm getting into if I'm going to be playing the game. But the times I've not had a good time haven't like with rules, haven't been with tabletop role-playing games. They've been with like massive board games like Twilight Imperium, where you have like so many phases and things. And I was playing over Zoom like in the height of the pandemic, and I was like, wow, I'm not having a good time here. Especially because everyone knew how to play except me, so that was very hard. But yeah, in terms of tabletop role-playing games, the rule heaviness doesn't necessarily matter to me, as long as everyone's going to help each other learn the rules and have a good time and have fun.
Yeah, Twilight Imperium seems like it's intense in person. I can't imagine trying to do that over Zoom. So B, we have a couple questions for you. The first one, you talked about building confidence in young players. What resources, tools, or strategies do you think that librarians could have make more use of at our tables to make our spaces more collaborative and help them build confidence?
Oh my gosh. Okay. Oh wow. I have so many thoughts in so little time. So I love when people ask me this question. So I guess so. So many people at the conference have been talking about how great it is when people are like asking other players like, what does that look like? How do you kill the dragon? Stuff like that. And that's amazing, because I really love when players are when people specifically carve space out for other people to do things, because a lot of not necessarily players of tabletop games, but a lot of teens and kids, for example, feel like they don't deserve to take up space, or don't deserve to be saying things, or like when they say things, the things they say have to be super great and so profound. And as someone with a speech impediment, whose impediment used to be way worse when I was younger, I very much fell victim to that kind of thing. So the resources I suggest librarians use are carving space out for people who don't necessarily talk much, especially if these kids maybe like come up to you after and say like, oh, that was really fun, but I felt like what I was saying was dumb, or like something. Because when kids see like other people playing and they're like, oh wow, that was so smart and like so cool, I wish I could be like that. Like the main what makes a tabletop role-playing game more fun for people, I think, is like having confidence. I used to not have confidence at all in my world building or my role playing, and now I just go and say things, and as long as they further what's going on and they give players, like other people, opportunities to say other things and do other things and to shine, that's super great. And as long as people are saying things that like that not even like fit with the world, like things that show they're engaging with what's happening and engaging with the other people and engaging with the table, and engaging with what people have created, that just make everything so much better. So the resources I would recommend for librarians, I don't have any specific resources, but mostly just carving out that space that tell people your voice or at the table matters, what you built is great. And that's why I think like if some kid like decides to put something in the world that's like the Tower of Dreams or like whatever little like world building thing, people interacting with that, people going back and forth, it teaches this kid, hey, they like what I'm doing, this makes me so happy, this makes me feel like I can engage with what's around the table more because people like that I'm here.
And Carl, feel free to jump on that if you had anything too.
I don't know that I could really add anything. That was amazing.
Yeah, carving the space is super important. It's hard for me not to jump in because, especially with the kids stuff, because this is really my wheelhouse. But if you look up the webinar that we just did on running TTRPGs for kids, there's a section that Amanda Blau did where she talked about the different kinds of players and how you can interact with those players and tips for giving them their space at the table, which was super cool. Next question for B. What game would you recommend for players new to collaborative world building?
Street Magic, absolutely. Like the presentation that I just gave, like, you know that Scooby-Doo meme with like the guy in the mask and then they take off his mask? It's literally just Street Magic propaganda. Like that was what I was doing. But yeah, really truly, I really recommend Street Magic for players new to collaborative world building. Because when I first played it, I was in a massive creative slump. It was also during the pandemic. It was like a month, a week even after I tried to play Twilight in Imperium online. And even when I was playing Street Magic with a bunch of people I didn't know at a zine festival online, it immediately created so many sparks and really got me back into collaborative world building, because you're given so many interesting prompts. You choose like 3 adjectives to start the city. You bounce off a bunch of other people. Like Street Magic is the epitome of like two or more heads are better than one. Like this is what this is about. So I'd really recommend that even to people who are new to collaborative world building, because there are a bunch of like quick start guides and like special sort of mechanics where you choose a compass and a focus of the city, and then you go around the table and everyone gets a chance to say something, because everyone like systematically goes around the table and is like, okay, what do you think about this focus we've picked? And it's totally great. So I really, really recommend it, both to like people who are new to collaborative world building and for shy people who are worried that what they have to say isn't good enough, because it absolutely is good enough.
Sorry, I was turning off I've got all of these weather alerts going off in my office right now. I'm fine. There's just a lot of thunderstorms going on. So some of the GameRT people, both in Zoom chat and on Discord, are very excited, and you do not have to agree to this now, B, but I will be contacting you to see if you would like to GM a game for us.
Oh, I
because
am
everyone is so
1000%
excited.
in. I would love to do this.
That would be amazing. So yeah, we'll email after this, but that would be super cool. I think we just had another question come in. So this one's coming from Regina. If Street Magic is good for collaborative play, does that mean it's also good for new GMs?
Not necessarily, because it's a GM-less game. So there is no one GM. Also, I see a cat in Carl's room. Oh my god.
Conference
Hello,
cat.
um, um, lots. Oh my god, what a legend! Thank you for sharing your cat's name. I love when people on Zoom share the cat's name with participants. Yeah, so Street Magic is not a GM game, it's a GM-less game. But games that are good for new GMs are any sort of powered by the apocalypse game. I would say, because those games are very much based on like player interaction with each other. So I'm in a game of the thirsty sword lesbians that has been going on for a month or so, and in that game it's all about like inter-character drama and like secrets and relationships and all of these question prompts that I mentioned, and it's super great. And as I mentioned, the GM of our current game is playing a character herself too. So it's really like not that much work to GM and play a character, especially since the dice rolls are so the mechanics are like I mean, there are a lot of mechanics to memorize in terms of like words, but all the mechanics are just rolling 2d6s and that's it. And yeah, I agree with Regina about GMs can be even better sometimes. Yeah, games that are good for groups where you don't have to rope someone into being a GM. And people throughout the day have been saying, yeah, GMs are so scarce, which means, yeah, playing GMless games are good because GMs are scarce. But if I had been able to play a Powered by the Apocalypse game a few years ago, I would have gotten back into GMing way sooner, and I can't wait to GM again. I'm planning to GM Monster Hearts very soon, and I'm super excited for that. So yeah.
And then question for both of you, what's a game that you would recommend for brand new GMs, both from both of your perspectives? So something that's easy to rule break if you're new to GMing and you may not have that experience, or something that's easy to GM if you're new that is open collaboration.
Yeah, I'll try to go at this. I think the first question I would ask is what type of like I don't know genre or experience do you and your players want, or what are they looking for? Do they want that kind of fantasy setting, that type of thing? Do they want something else? The Powered by the Apocalypse rule set is I think a nice in between type of rule set, and because it's open source, there's a lot of different settings. So one like a theme for me that I really like in a lot of games is like the heist theme. I love it. So one of the Powered by the Apocalypse games is Blades in the Dark, and they have mechanisms built in that really kind of make that theme shine through. And it's not hard. It's a D6 type system. There's you can like pillage your Monopoly set to be able to play this. I see somebody's playing this Sunday. But they also have there's Monster of the Week, which can be really good because it's episodic. That could be something that's good for a library program. And it's a similar type of rule set. So once you do it's not super thin, it's not a one-page RPG type situation, but once you do like dig into it a little bit, it's not that bad. There's like one main mechanism that you use, and then you just apply that to different character designs, and it transfers from one hack, the Monster of the Week or Blades in the Dark. I can't remember what the fantasy one is offhand, but yeah, you can that's maybe a good one because it's not at all as complex as something like D&D, and it has a lot of settings, so you could hit a lot of different people's desires for setting. So that might be a good one.
And did you have anything you wanted to add to that, B? Oh, Forged in the Dark, Carl, is the
Oh yeah. And I think I wanted to add to that about games for good, games for new GMs. I mean, other than the one Carl and I have mentioned, nothing is coming to mind specifically, and I'm sure as soon as like the conference ends, I'm going to be like, oh gosh, dang it. But if you like, I'm sure all of you own at least one itch bundle. If you go through that itch bundle, there's definitely going to be like an incredible one-page role-playing game that someone can GM in, and it will not be hard. At least one, at the very least one.
There's so many.
And it's it's like how the best way to start writing is to start writing. The best way to start GMing is to start GMing. And the reason I had such a hard time GMing the first time I ever did it was because I tried to GM the Lost Mines of Phandelver. I love how Carl just lost his mind at that. I because I wasn't able to conceptualize what was in the world and what wasn't, and what I could do and what I couldn't do, and I didn't understand like my power as the GM. So that was really difficult for me, and was definitely the reason I wanted to do this presentation. So yeah, I wouldn't suggest that new GMs start with D&D, because starting with D&D, I think there's a lot of pressure to start with D&D, especially because a lot of GMs think that if they're not Matt Mercer or Brennan Lee Mulligan, they're not a good enough GM, and they absolutely are. And a lot of GMs that I know are not don't really like how prominent those GMs are, because they set such a high standard for players to want their GMs to be. So yeah, I wouldn't recommend people start with D&D specifically if they are a new GM. But rules light game that's very roleplay focused and doesn't involve having a massive plot that you write for many years and can span centuries and have a massive world. The best way to start GMing is to start GMing.
Yeah, I think one game that I like to recommend that is both very collaborative in world building, but also has the fewest rules of any TTRPG I've seen. Well, it's actually almost kind of a LARP, is Tiniest Wizard. It fits on a business card, and you can play in a physical space, and the players interpret whatever is in the room as the scenery, as the NPCs. They fully interpret, and you just react to what they're telling you. You don't have to have any story set up. You just can go off what they say and make stuff up as you go. If you're playing in a condensed time, you can have some story hooks, like maybe you put specific items in the room that are attached to specific story hooks that they can pick up on if you need to get that going. But it's a really fun physical space. Very low rules, very
I
collaborative.
love that so much. Wow.
It's a lot of fun. And next question for Carl. Have you had a chance to train any GMs in the library? And if so, can you walk us through the process of helping them learn and how to get them on board with dropping rules and hacking those rule sets?
This is such a good question, and I'm gonna have to say no, which is a terrible answer because of part two. But I do really the resource doc that we have, I would lean on a lot of that. I really do like the recommendation. I can't remember who called it out specifically, a couple people throughout the day, of the Sly Flourish resources and what he has to say. I also do. I don't think I saw it on the resource document. And it's kind of the maybe opposite of what I just presented, because he really likes very crunchy games. But Matt Colville has he really does a great job, especially his early stuff of making this accessible. And he does talk a lot in terms of D&D, but a lot of his ideas are applicable to any game you're running. So I would lean on ideas from them, as well as my own experience to try to bring somebody in that would want to learn how to do those things. I think Bee's really on point though with her observation. At a certain point, somebody interested just has to do it. And I think most people are probably, if they're really interested in it, going to over prepare that first session. And That's why I think I have it here. Yeah, that's why somebody had called this out specifically, is a fantastic resource that I think hits that sweet spot for somebody who is not wanting to under prepare, but also not wanting to over prepare. Like this puts you in a good place, and it does a lot of the things that I find to be important of really the very first thing in prepping for a session. Every session is to review your players' character sheets and what their characters are, so that it puts in your head before you even prep for the session, what are they doing, who are they, and that really helps guide it. It also gives you a lot, the way he outlines things gives you a lot of freedom to not say, okay, the hourglass is in the desk and that's the only place this hourglass that's really important to the game exists. No, they're just going to find this somewhere, and wherever they go, whatever they do, they're going to find this, and that's great. And so having that kind of mindset is a really great way for new DMs to approach. So I haven't done that yet, but I have thought about it, and I would probably incorporate those types of things.
Yeah, those are great. And I think especially like DMing for kids, you have to be flexible. Like you can't get stuck on they're going to find this item in the wizard tower and they're not going to find it anywhere else. Like what if they never go there? Your players are going to do unexpected things all the time. So you can't get um, hooked on these specific expectations, because it's going to lead to disappointment for you because they didn't do the thing that you wanted, but for them because they're not exploring, as much of what they could. Or I feel like if you set yourself up as a GM for disappointment like that, it comes through in the way that you're running the game, and the players can feel that, and that doesn't feel good. If you can feel that the person running your game is frustrated with decisions that the players are making, it just creates this like negativity feedback loop that's not fun for anybody. All right. I think that was our last question. And we are very near 6:30, so I think this is a fine time to wrap up. Thank you, Bea and Carl, for your presentations and for answering all of those questions. And thank you to all of our presenters that we've had today. Today's conference was super fun to plan, and we are hoping to do a mini conference like this kind of on an annual basis with GameRT. So we'll see what next year's theme is going to be. Um, but thanks to all of our presenters, all of our chat moderators, you've all been excellent. And in the chat, we will drop the links where you can sign up for our upcoming events, as well as another chance to click on the link for the slides and resources for this conference if you haven't yet accessed those. And please, we highly encourage you to fill out the feedback survey so that we can get some feedback to our presenters about how you think they did today and how useful all of the knowledge they shared was. And we did include a chance for you to earn a chance to win that TTRPGs for Trans Rights in Florida bundle that is on itch right now. So go fill out those surveys. You might win 505 role-playing games. Pretty cool. But this does conclude our first ever mini conference. So I hope you have had as much fun as all of the GameRT staff have had. And we look forward to seeing y'all on Discord. You can continue to chat there. But for now, have a good night and keep on gaming. Bye, everybody.